For a type with only one real damaging move and an awful psychic weakness, Ghosts in the first Pokemon games are incredible. Today I want to deep dive into the Ghost of Generation 1. That means that Gastly, Haunter, Gengar, they're each going to get their own individual solo run, and we're going to see how fast they can beat Pokemon Red. Check the description if you want to brush up on the rules. To tell the tale of the ghost typing in the first Pokemon games, I think we should start with the original anime. Sabrina's gym has a wild 3-part arc, including like split personalities, turning people into toys. Ash even died. We don't really need to talk about all that. It's pretty crazy for a children's cartoon, but the point is that we're told to beat the infamously overpowered psychic types, you need a ghost type Pokemon. Now the first Pokemon games are notorious for not really being polished, and the juxtaposition with the anime is just night and day. If we look at the code, you can see that ghost typing was likely added last, and you can infer that the developers probably scrambled to balance the out of control psychic types, but as they say, the path to hell is often paved with good intentions. Now let me kind of quickly lay out where the games fail at making the ghost type a psychic counter. Number 1, the only real damaging move is Lick at 20 base power, which is among the weakest moves in the game. And number 2 is that Ghost is a physical type in these games, meaning that it's going to use your attack stat. And guess who has a very low attack stat? Ghost. For example, Gastly only has 35 base attack, which is the same as Weedle. I don't even need to say anymore. Number 3, the only ghost in this game were given the poison typing, making them weak to the type that they're supposed to be strong against. And number 4, finally, is that some coding oversights led to the wrong values being inserted into the type chart, which resulted in psychic types being completely immune to ghost, which means even if you had like a 200 base power ghost move, you still couldn't hit Alakazam even if you wanted to. But despite the deck being seemingly stacked against our spectral friends, ghost typing is still incredible. Even in its infant form in the very first games, being immune to normal types negates like basically half the damage in the game. And if we're being glass half full, being part poison does a few things. At least being immune to poison is kind of helpful. About the best you can say for poison. Flipping over to the stats, we're going to see a cascading trend from Gastly all the way up to Gengar. Gastly starts off with abysmal attack, but it has a very solid 100 base special along with 80 speed, and then Haunter's going to jump that up to 115 special, 95 speed, and finally Gengar has a monster 130 special and an even higher 110 speed. And I tell you this to set up the base expectations that Gastly is going to be the baseline, and each evolution will be just a little bit better, so don't think of this as a versus video, but rather each Pokemon kind of building off of each other, culminating in 3 very solid runs. Now as for the early game, we're just doing the bare minimum. I'm going to pick up a single potion for every single run, but after the one mandatory battle in Viridian Forest, we can take a look at Brock. Brock will be our introduction into the unique mechanic only found in these runs. Nightshade is a signature move unique to the Gastly line in Generation 1. Now Seismic Toss does exist, it does the same exact thing, but the lowest any Pokemon learns it is Pinsir at level 25, and the fastest way to get it is near the end of Nugget Bridge. Now we'll go into detail about Nightshade after the battle, but what you need to know here is that it does fixed damage. Whatever your level is, that's how much damage it's going to do, and even on Gengar, Lick is never going to outpace it. Just so we know what's going on in the battle, Geodude is going to take 5 Nightshades. It cannot hurt you since we have the ghost type, but Gastly and Haunter do not outspeed Onix, which means Bide can take you out. You could be safe, you could swap to something else if it does Bide, but speed is the name of the game, and I find that on each of these runs, it's just kind of worth it just to go for Confuse Ray. That way, even if Onix goes for an immediate Bide, there's a 50% chance it would just be knocked out of it, and since it only takes 4 Nightshades to take it out, it felt extremely consistent, and that's going to get us the first badge. So let's dive a little bit deeper now. Pokemon is a game of random numbers and luck. Each move for the most part is a range, and you never really know exactly how much damage you'll do, and when you factor in crits, it adds just another layer with even more ranges to the equation, and that's why it can take a while to kind of get a good feel for routing and just playing the game a lot. Nightshade takes that, and it turns Pokemon into a very simple math equation. You know exactly how much damage you're going to do, and using Nightshade as your primary damaging move makes things consistent no matter what playthrough that you're doing. And keep in mind, grind, we're going to be using this move up into the 3rd gym. So no matter if you're using Gastly, Haunter, Gengar, really doesn't even matter if you're using Caterpie or Mewtwo, if you only have Nightshade and a weak move, it's going to play out exactly the same. So for instance here, you can look at my scrawlings of a madman. This is my Route 3 going to Mount Moon. You can see that I know exactly what I need to do. Only use one Nightshade on the first bug catcher, swap to Lick to the rest, and then you'll see a lot of combinations of 2 Nightshades plus a Lick, because you do have to preserve PP. You also have to keep in mind that there's a lot of normal types that are immune to Lick, so even though 2 Nightshades might leave Rattata on just a sliver of health, you do need to use a 3rd Nightshade. Now you could technically use Confuse Ray, but it's only a coin flip, and it personally did not feel good to me. Now the whole point is that there's roughly 6 parts of the game with this kind of careful planning. You only have 15 uses of Nightshade, so you need to use all of them for the Brock Split, heal, plan out the next 15 through Route 3, heal before Mount Moon, so on and so forth, until you beat Lieutenant Surge. Now in terms of gameplay for each of the 3 runs, let's focus on the minor differences between Gastly and Haunter for now. Brock and Route 3 are the same, both requiring 2 heals before Mount Moon, but Gastly will be picking up the rare candy here and the escape rope, while Haunter can just afford to buy an escape rope and skip this candy. And I haven't mentioned this for a while. I try not to mention it every single video, but just to refresh everybody, it's good to talk about it. There are 12 rare candies in the game, and this is like in the bottom 3 or 4 in terms of taking the most time to get. Now you'll almost always skip the Power Plant candy and the Victory Road candy that leaves 10, and then you have this candy, the 10th floor Silph Co candy, and the candy on the SSN. Those are the first 3 on the chopping block when you're trying to, maybe cut into those sub 2-hour times. And I'm not trying to say that Gastly is going to be a bad run because it gets this candy. I'm just foreshadowing that it does need a little extra help compared to its big brothers as the run progresses. And this is going to take us directly to Misty, and I have to be transparent. This is an awful and terrible fight, and you probably should not fight Misty first. Specifically for Gastly, I did a lot of runs, and I'll go into detail just how many later, but this was one of several spots going towards the mid game that could just end your run. The idea is that with a level-based move, being able to just squeak through here and get multiple levels will pay dividends with all the trainer battles coming up. You already know. And I would say that it's true, but let's focus on the now. As for the battle, we'll just be watching the successful attempt here. Now the failures almost always came down to Starmie critting, or maybe only using Bubble Beam, or just ignoring Confuse Ray. Now my personal bar for these runs was just being okay with 1 or 2 resets going into Celadon, but I think with enough attempts and enough grind, you can get an early Misty, and the run felt much better for it. Rival number 2 is a spot where you might just reset the run if it goes off the rails and takes too much time, and that's because 3 of his 4 Pokemon are immune to Lick. This means at the bare minimum you need 7 Nightshades, including 3 on the Pidgeotto. This gives your opponent several chances to get off a sand attack, and when the routing is so tight here, trying to spread out 15 power points of Nightshade with careful planning, it can just basically ruin everything if you start to miss. But we do make it through here, and after licking Squirtle down, you know what time it is. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but Nugget Bridge in the Path to Bill's house contains the single highest cluster of mandatory battles in the entire game. Unfortunately, Nightshade is a 2-shot on pretty much everything, and there are several spots where you have to use 3 total moves, so execution and just sticking to the plan is key here. Assuming that you get a good rival number 2 fight, you do need to heal after a few battles, and with the elixir found later in the route, you can make it to the end with a pretty decent time. Now, like most runs, you're going to do a ton of attempts, and you're going to start whittling them down to where the margin for error is just so razor thin. And I just found this stretch of the game to be the absolute worst part of the run. It's no secret that I think Nugget Bridge is just, it's such a slog. There's so many trainers here. From Gastly's Misty battle feeling like it was like a 35% success rate at worst, to rival number 2 with Sand Attack, to the tedium of hoping that you stay on schedule with Nightshade. This is basically what made or braked the run once I got the routing down, but it does get better or worse depending on how you're looking at it. And I also want to take a real quick second to say, hey, you might be noticing, why is the Haunter shiny? Why is the Gengar shiny? These are called prestige runs. These are runs that I've done several times, and I'm making them shiny just to kind of denote that this will probably be the last time I'm running them. It's just called a prestige run. Gastly has not had a modern run, so it's not shiny. I just wanted to throw that out there real quick just in case you're confused. And I also wanted to call out 2 minor trainers that that I feel like I haven't brought up in a while. Number one is the dig rocket grunt. You already know hypnosis, the threat of being put to sleep, and that super effective confusion. It just gives you potential to basically just die right here in the run. And then when we get outside of Vermilion, we got the infamous triple Pidgey Junior Trainer. You do have access to 2 ethers during this part of the game, effectively giving you 35 total uses of Nightshade, but a turn 1 sand attack into a few misses can basically just soft lock the run and just force you to restart. There's really no better way to handle this fight. It is what it is, but I do want to call out the problem areas because it's going to be the same for basically every single run. Also, this is the part of the game where you have to start canceling evolutions for Gastly. It's just one of those things. It's annoying, but I do think it's part of the game. It's just a drawback that pre-evolved Pokemon have to deal with, but Gastly starts dealing with it here. On the SSN, we have another slight deviation between the runs. Just like earlier, Gastly is going to do another optional battle, pick up a candy here. Both Gastly and Haunter also have to dip down into the basement real quick to pick up that extra ether, and Gastly's route is a little bit tighter due to the extra battle, but don't worry guys, we got it all planned out. Rival number 3 pretty much faces the same issues as rival number 2. 75% of the team is immune to Lick, and it forces you to use Nightshade. This is another time where a sand attack into cascading misses can just ruin the entire run, but the action itself, not really that interesting here. Moving on to Surge, there are some annoying things. Haunter has to just brute force his way through the fight, but the higher stats make it not that bad. But Gastly does learn Hypnosis right after Voltorb. Sonic Boom hurts. Getting paralyzed by Pikachu makes things that much tougher. And even though we have good special, Raichu Thunderbolts still threaten a knockout. They still add up a lot. And I end up having a hard time with both Pokemon here. Even on my best run, you can see how close it is, but I consider this a huge victory because I didn't have to use any early candies. I didn't do that much extra, if anything, like with Haunter. And this is the point now where the runs are getting very close to just blasting off. Now, my friends, like I just said, this is where the runs start to pick up a lot of steam and start to snowball with access to Thunderbolt. No longer do these runs have to rely on Nightshade alone for the bulk of damage, and outside of a few spots left in the game, things become infinitely more fun to play. And this is also where we would usually look at split data, but I think some of you might have noticed that I haven't really talked about Gengar, so I think it's time we do that. Gengar has the highest stats of the 3, so by default you would expect it to do the best, but it does have a couple of aces up its sleeve. Even on the Brock split, Gengar's high speed means it naturally outspeeds Onix. That means you can skip the Confuse Ray, and unless Onix goes for a turn 1 bide that lasts exactly 2 turns, you really can't lose. Now, moving first and saving a turn already starts our spooky boy off ahead of the curve, and after that, Route 3 is going to remain the same. It has that little planned Nightshade route like the previous runs, but it's all going to change when we get to Mount Moon. The main draw of Gengar is that it gets access to solid TMs that the pre-evolutions don't get, and that's access to Mega Punch and eventually Body Slam. And I cannot stress how much Mega Punch changes the game. Now, I'm no stranger to Gengar. I have an extremely old video, and then I redid the run live on stream in 2022, but at that point back in time, my inexperience and my bias really showed, because I don't even think I took a look at Mega Punch, because back then I felt like the community mindset, everybody just thought, you got low base attack and the move has lower accuracy, so surely it wouldn't be an upgrade, don't even look at it. But I'm here to tell you today that it's not and day. And I'm gonna throw out some numbers for you guys. In an elite top tier run, like think about something competing in my How Overpowered series, you would see those runs have roughly 62 turns up to Lieutenant Surge. In the Gastly and Haunter route, let's just say there are roughly 135 turns in that same amount of time. So you can see the difference that using Nightshade primarily has on the runs. Having access to Mega Punch turns 3 shots into 2 shots, 2 shots into potential 1 shots, and the raw number that you need to know here is that from Mount Moon all the way to Lieutenant Surge, Mega Punch can save Gengar anywhere from 30 to 45 turns depending on accuracy and crits. This means that just in this little portion of the game, Gengar has an efficiency boost of around 28% over the other ghosts, and I talk about this a lot, but the early game is so important to keep it flowing. And when you're on Nugget Bridge, the single highest cluster of mandatory battles, with a lot of one-shot ranges, you're saving turns, the time really starts to add up, and I really want to shine a spotlight here because perhaps more than anything else in the entire video, this is where Gengar makes his mark to really stand out from the other ghosts, which are already really solid at the end of the day. Now remember, I started this concept of a video by wanting to rank the ghost, and the plan here was that I would fully optimize and just grind out Gastly, and then I would build off of that. But I'll go ahead and give you guys an early spoiler. The fun that I ended up having making this video was seeing how far that I could push. Outside of that, I will be picking up Body Slam as well, and I'm going to tell you the logic behind it. I talk about it in the Blastoise run. I skipped Body Slam because I just wouldn't use it that much and it didn't really impact the run. It is going to cost you a quick battle and you'll have to pick up the item and use the TM. But think about it this way, if I miss Mega Punch even a single time from this point on in the run, I think it's going to cost me about the same time as just picking up Body Slam. And when you have 85% accuracy, you are going to miss a few times. Now the second big thing for me was the 5 extra base power over Mega Punch. It actually matters a good bit in terms of ranges. Now when there's like key fights in the game that go from like a 35 to 40% 2-shot range, and that jumps up to over 50% for the 2-shot, it feels better. And the final thing is that 1 out of 3 paralysis chance is just an added bonus that can come in clutch. Not that I really need to justify every micro decision that I do, but I just found it to not be that intuitive in this case, and I wanted to talk about it. As for Surge, you already know we got that big PP speed, we got that big PP damage. Pikachu's a one-shot, we naturally outspeed the Raichu, and we just kind of sort of win. There's not really much to it, and I think this fight is a great example of Gengar's early game doing things that just wasn't possible with the other ghost. Now we can finally get into some of that juicy split data, and I went a different format this week. You can see we got 3 runs. Gastly has 3 red splits. Haunter did whittle that down just a little bit, but Gengar, like we just talked about, we started off with that faster Brock split, and once we got access to Mega Punch, we really put our foot on the gas, and we got a 5-minute lead over Haunter. Now remember, just one more time I want to say this. The thought process for this video was I would start off with Gastly, and I would just optimize it and just grind it out until I felt good with it, and then Haunter would use Gastly's route skeleton, push it even further, and then finally when we got to Gengar, I'd have the full knowledge of the other 2 runs, and it just felt like a really satisfying process. I'm going to tell you guys how many runs I did total soon, but we got something to talk about for a second. Specifically with Gastly and Haunter, there's a lot of areas that I've covered that were kind of problematic, and you would think that at this point it would be all over since we finally got Thunderbolt, but not so fast. First, we'll watch Gengar take on the Rapping Junior Trainer, and it looks like it's going to be easy. Even though I don't get it here, a crit will knock out Oddish, and the one-shot on the Bellsprouts is guaranteed. The problem I had with this fight was paralysis. Even though there was essentially 0 chance that you would lose the battle, there are fates worse than death, like getting all your time wasted by getting wrapped while you're paralyzed. And if you didn't know, there's this weird interaction in Gen 1 with Wrap, where even though you are a ghost type immune to the damage, it's still going to prevent you from taking your turns. It can still lock you down forever. I think it's a downright despicable bug, and you can see that Haunter's run doesn't go perfect here. It was nice to avoid the first Oddish using paralysis, but the second one does get me. I still get that wrap. And guys, this was such a problematic area that I routed in Paralyzed Heals for both Gastly and Haunter. I don't think out of any of my attempts, I made it out of this fight not being paralyzed. It was so annoying. And the fun's not done, because did you guys know that Pokemaniacs have good AI? That means that the first one in Rock Tunnel will always use Bone Club. And the route I went, it meant that 2 Nightshades is just not enough to knock it out. Now Body Slam from Gengar is slightly better, but the play here is to Confuse Ray, use that 50-50 shot to get it to hurt itself at least once, and that confusion damage will push it into a 2-shot Nightshade range. Now you can see how much damage the Bone Club actually does, especially to Gastly. And now I think it's finally time to circle back around and talk about how many runs I did for this video. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, guys. These runs, especially Gastly, can be very frustrating. Oftentimes, as you trim down a route, trying to get a solid time that I'm proud of, you can turn a run into its most basic and minimal form, where the balance of consistency and risk turns more and more to that risky side. Now, I'm sure Gastly's run would be very easy and very consistent with a few extra battles in the early game, maybe even using some early candies, but I saw a lot of potential in these runs. Now, let me preface what I'm about to say by reminding you that normally I try to do about 3 full runs, maybe an extra run or 2, but that's usually my standard. Even if I stuck to that, remember that I am doing 3 Pokemon in this video, but sit down, brace yourself because I have to come clean. I did 27 total runs for this video. Gastly got the brunt of them because I kept just not being happy with the early game all the way up to Rock Tunnel, but I clocked in with about 16 attempts and I just couldn't help myself. Haunter clocked in with the least amount of attempts with 4 runs, and Gengar got 7 runs, and I'll try to remember at the end of the video to specifically tell you why I did so many runs with Gengar. I don't want to spoil anything at the moment. And I think this is generally why I would like to focus on one Pokemon, but months and months and months ago, I had a vision of October, and even though life happens, I talked about it in the last video, I knew that I wanted to push myself to see how much time it would take me to get a triple Pokemon video out, because I enjoyed the process of playing that pre-evolved Pokemon as like stepping on the landmine and learning everything about it and using that as a jump start to figure out the evolved Pokemon. It felt like a really good method, I guess. The only downside is that it just took a lot of time and I don't really have a lot of time. So if you enjoy this content, I'm going to tell you right now, you want to help me out, make sure you show some love to this video, whether it be a comment, a like. If you like it a lot, maybe even become a channel member. But I think at this point, going into the mid game, we've really set up all the Pokemon, and I think we can start to maybe pick up the pace now. Now we're in Celadon, and we're going to stick to Gastly for several segments because he's just going to be doing a little bit more. Specifically in the Celadon Mart, I had to pick up some extra TMs and sell some items because it's absolutely pivotal for Gastly to get 2 Carbos. I'm also going to be picking up the 3 available Overworld Carbos for a grand total of 5 that I probably forget or I don't really want to harp on it in this video. But the other 2 ghosts, they're just in and out, no need for vitamins. And now we can get on to one of the most important parts of the video. We have access to fresh water. That means we can visit Saffron City early, and that means we can get access to the TM for Psychic. And with the 1-2 punch of Thunderbolt and Psychic, the inhibitors are finally off. Nightshade is now relegated to a few niche uses, and we have everything we need to succeed at this point. And we're gonna get to see this pay off immediately inside the Rocket Hideout. Even after we got Thunderbolt, things like grass types or ground types still require Nightshade, but I cannot state enough how much the ability to not only utilize our huge special is, but being able to trivialize all the things that used to resist or are immune to Thunderbolt, just it feels so nice. It's got me feeling good, and I'm gonna ride that high until the end of the game. In Pokemon Tower, there's some foreshadowing as we start to inch closer towards the end of the game. Everything in this fight is fine. Thunderbolt itself can just pick up a bunch of one-shots, but I want you to notice Execute. This thing will never be able to threaten us, ever. But good AI means that it will go for Hypnosis, and we're never really gonna have a great answer to it, and there's always gonna be a pretty good shot that it can just waste a ton of our time. Now, you could try to use Hypnosis first, but I did so many runs at this point that it felt bad to use Hypnosis this early in the game, and I just didn't want to resort to being a coward that hides behind Hypnosis whenever there's even like a slight bit of inconvenience, you know what I'm saying? Outside of that, there is one piece of tech that both Gengar and Haunter are going to use here that Gastly doesn't. I'm going to hold off on using a Super Repel, and I'm going to knock off basically any wild ghost that pops up. There's going to be a point very soon where I'm like 150 experience away from a level, and I'm going to want to use my candies, and this was the fastest way to get past that point. Afterwards, all 3 are going to go to the Safari Zones, and since we're in the medium slow level up group, that means we don't have to worry about wild encounters at all. Now, the main point, like most runs, is to get our bags filled up after Silph Co, but what's important here is that Gastly is going to do another extra battle with the bottom biker that has 2 Weezings. It's a very similar situation as to why Gengar and Haunter would pick up that extra wild battle, but Gastly just wants an extra level over those 2 runs, and since we have Psychic, it just makes it very fast. Now it's time for Silph Co, and we're going to be sticking with Gastly because it just does the most. I'm going to be headed straight to the 10th floor for multiple reasons. Number one, I need the experience from the battle, I'm going to need the carbos, and I'm going to need that rare candy. I'm also going to level up after the Machoke Rocket Grunt, and I'm going to pop 6 candies to go all the way up to level 43, and that's where I'm going to hit that power spike to make the rest of the game as easy as possible. Gengar and Haunter, they can cut out anything extra, and with that wild encounter earlier, I'm going to level up after the card key grunt. I am going to pop 3 candies. That's going to get these runs up to level 39, and I think now we can finally take a look at rival number 5. I'm going to make things simple and just stick with Gastly, because if Gastly can do it, you can just imagine how the other runs are. They're just better. With extra levels, Thunderbolt does its job, but as we progress, you'll see once again that I'm not going to use Hypnosis on Execute. I just risk it because here, specifically in this fight, it's never going to be able to kill you, and it has an equal chance to use Reflect as it does Hypnosis. Hypnosis has a high chance to miss. You even have the chance at a retroactive potion, and I just felt really comfortable with this play. I will start to use Hypnosis on Alakazam at this point. The damage is just really high. Even a confusion crit will just crush you. We hit our moves, Thunderbolt cleans up, and we get through here fairly clean. And now that we got our bags full, it's about time to go in that gym leader blitz. Before we jump in, I want to talk about this execute before Erika. There is a risk of Hypnosis here. Our old pal Gengar is just going to one-shot it with a crit, but I found the risk to save turns here worth it over the other route. As for Erika, Gengar just has the ranges to one-shot everything. Gastly can't really one-shot Tangela, but it doesn't really matter. All the runs pretty much handled this one pretty easy as expected. In Koga's gym, we have to talk about the jugglers since they are some of the more annoying trainers in the entire game. This is going to be another showcase where Body Slam can just save you turns by picking up the one-shot, and you're going to see that I'm going to crit on the last one, so I get 2 one-shots here. Gastly and Haunter have to use Nightshade for 2 hits here. Haunter can fish for Thunderbolt crits if it wants to, but this is just going to be our appetizer for Psychic types. As for the gym itself, we do have Psychic. That's pretty much the long and short of it. Even if we didn't, there's absolutely nothing that Koga can do to us. And outside of every run not being able to one-shot the Wheezing, nothing major happens, other than seeing that I let Gengar get really low in these runs just to try to push that time. Now it's time to take that brisk swim down to Cinnabar, and all Pokemon are going to do the same thing here. We're going to pick up all available candies and we're going to pop them to make room for the secret key. Gastly will pick up the Carbos and ultimately get to level 50, while Haunter and Gengar will get up to level 48, and that's going to set us up for the end of the game. And even though it's spooky season, you might think that some of these ghosts might have an idea if TM28 is actually
Tombstoner, brother,
or not, but they don't. Blaine really isn't that bad of a fight. It's just kind of like a neutral battle, with the main threat being Fire Blast at the end. For Haunter here, I do start off with some Psychics just on the weaker ones because Thunderbolt is 5 base power stronger. It's not really the cleanest fight, and I do tank a Fire Blast. I get kind of low on Haunter here. The crit might have bailed me out, but you guys know that Blaine likes the Super Potion, so it's not even guaranteed that I would have died, but we do make it through, and let's move on to the next gym. For Sabrina, you can play this a few ways. The TLDR before I talk too long is that I don't Hypnosis Kadabra, and it opens us up to a turn 1 Psychic crit, and this is where Gastly has its first reset. Now to go into this more, I take the risk on Kadabra because a Psychic normally only does like half, and you can take it out in 2 turns. I opt to Hypnosis Alakazam even though it has weaker moves because it takes longer to take out. There's more of a risk overall, but it's genuinely not a bad fight at all, even on the weakest Pokemon in this video. Now again, I want to take a look at Gengar just for contrast to see how the extra moves and the stats really help it stand out. Here I can just take out Kadabra in 1 shot with the Body Slam, guaranteed. I get 1 shots on the next 2 Pokemon, and I don't even fear the Alakazam. A Body Slam crit can cleanly take it out, and the 2 shot is guaranteed, and even with a crit, Alakazam couldn't touch Gengar. Even if you use Psybeam 2 turns in a row, there's only a 40% chance that Gengar would even go down, but that's going to be another one in the books. Let's go back to Gastly for Giovanni because there's a funny way the stats turned out. On Doug Trio, Gastly needs to crit or hit a max roll to get the knockout. This is just one of those things where it would be kind of cool to have 1 more level, but I am going for speed here, and I just want to focus on how much damage that the dig actually does. It does a ton of damage, and if it wasn't obvious, this is why I'm playing Pokemon Red instead of Pokemon Yellow. These ghosts are pretty frail and they do not want to see late game ground damage, but Gastly does survive, everyone does well here in this fight, and each Pokemon is going to get the 8th badge. Let's flip over to Haunter so we can kind of get a middle ground in rival number 6. Just like rival number 5, it's fine for the first few Pokemon. But this one is a little bit different because Execute does not know Hypnosis anymore, but rather it knows Sleep Powder. It actually doesn't know any psychic moves, which means it's more or less just random. Alakazam is fine as well. Even though it could do a lot of damage, you have a very low range on the 2-hit, and you have a guaranteed 3-hit. So I only use Hypnosis on the Gastly for this fight. And of course, Gengar does have Body Slam to save some turns, but this one's pretty clean, and now all our contestants are headed towards that finish line. This means it's time to take one final look at the splits for our 3 Pokemon, and just like earlier, every split is in the order that you would expect them, with Gastly in 3rd, Haunter in 2nd, Gengar in 1st. I would like to reiterate that Gastly definitely added in some extra battles, he needed vitamins and did some other extracurricular things, but for me, you can't state enough at how much time was added just because I was canceling evolutions. It's going to boil down to a 2-hour 3-minute Elite Four start time, putting Gastly in a great position to get into the A tier, and the other Pokemon are just going to build off of that. Haunter is fighting for a sub 2-hour time, which I always try really hard for. I'll talk about that at the end. But if you notice here, Gengar is on a fantastic pace. Now it's not going to beat Mewtwo or anything like that, but it can make a splash near the top of the tier list, so I was really excited to see that. Outside of that, I think we're just set up, we're ready to go. It's time to fade, and let's just take a look at the Elite Four. Alright guys, here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to stick with Gastly unless something interesting changes the fight. At this point, we all understand that Gastly is the weakest version, and if Gastly is going to easily handle these fights, we can just use our imagination and we can just understand what the other Pokemon with the same moves but better stats will do. Now here, Dugong cannot hurt you due to good AI, Jinx is basically the only threat due to maybe a crit or freezing you, and Lapras will basically just spam Confuse Ray due to good AI. Now it never fails in these runs. I don't know what it is. I want to say out of all my attempts, almost every single one of them, I kept hurting myself in confusion on the Lapras. You know, Lorelei has that little cheaty AI, but I think overall this is a pretty simple fight.
Bruno.
Agatha's a bit of a weird one. You can use Psychic against her, but the high special generally prevents one-shots, so Hypnosis is always on the table among other annoying things. We all know that Agatha has random AI, so it's just kind of a coin flip if anything bad will actually happen, but this one basically to me comes down to the first Gengar, and you could even go further and say that it just comes down to the first turn. That kind of sets the tone for the battle, but outside of Hypnosis into Dream Eaters, this one plays out exactly how you would think. I feel like at least a few times a year I have to talk about poison types and their interaction with Lance. Now we have Thunderbolt for the Gyarados, and that's the only Pokemon that poses any sort of threat because the 2 Dragonairs and the Dragonite, they have non-damaging psychic moves on their sets, which means they'll never attack us. And outside of maybe Supersonic into hitting ourselves into confusion, Aerodactyl can't hurt us either. So this is a very, very free fight, and I would dare say that the Gastly line has the best Pokemon Red Lance matchup in the entire game. I think you could literally be at 1 health and not really be worried about this fight. We'll go through each Pokemon's champion battle, but Pidgeot can be annoying for Gastly. I think it was my original Gastly video where I missed Hypnosis. Pidgeot mirror moved it, put me to sleep, and then beat me down. Very crazy sequence of events. Basically, you can't one-shot it and you might take some damage, but that's not really important. What is important is that Gastly needed to be exactly level 59, have used 5 Carbos, and this will let you outspeed the champion's Alakazam by a single point. This was absolutely pivotal because Alakazam is actually really, really good here, and it will completely destroy you if you're moving second while relying on a 50-50 Hypnosis chance to get through the fight. Moving first drastically increases your chances of success, and ultimately, that's what the run came down to. Over half of my runs did end before reaching Celadon with Gastly, but the rest were pretty much all Elite Four related incidents that made the final tally of the run just feel not that great to me. and routing this one this way felt so much better. Anyway, it might sound like I'm just making a victory lap here, but there's a little bit more to get into. Arcanine is actually going to burn me, and that's going to be both a blessing and a curse. Now, at this point, I'm healthy enough to where it's not going to cause me any danger, and having a status means that I'm immune to hypnosis, which means that Executor is a complete non-factor. It can't put me to sleep, and it can't damage me. Now, do take notice of just how long it takes to get through this thing. Executor ended up being the huge limiting factor on saving time in this run, but at the end, after I started taking some damage on that Executor, the burn starts to matter. Blastoise is going to get off a hit. I think if it went for Hydro Pump here, it's going to be a reset, but Gastly does barely survive the blizzard, tosses out a couple of Thunderbolts, and we're going to end the run clocking in with a final time of 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 57 seconds with one reset. We don't have to do the whole play-by-play with Haunter, but we know the Pidgeot, it's a range, it's whatever. But here's why using Hypnosis is just so frustrating. Eventually, you're going to miss, and sometimes the computer just says, hey, you know what? I'm going to crit you. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. We're going to get one shot, and that's going to be the first reset for Haunter. It goes fine on the next attempt, and keep in mind that normally you get 2 or 3 chances at Hypnosis, since a non-crit cannot knock you out, and there's a chance that it uses a weaker move or even uses Reflect, but I don't want to spend all day talking about this, you understand. The whole point is that these runs are very stressful when you try to get everything to line up perfect, because it rarely ever does. Now thankfully, the fight really eases up after that, with the sole exception being Executor, and that's just because it wastes so much of your time. The coin flip goes in Haunter's favor, Nightshade does its job one last time, and with this much health remaining, it's all but a formality to get past the Blastoise, and we can finalize Haunter's run with a 2 hour and 16 second time. So close to sub 2 hours, but I'll come back to that at the end. Picking up with Gengar, would you believe me if I told you that it meets the same fate as Haunter? Turn 1, Psychic Crit, one shot from the Alakazam, and that's going to put a tiny blemish in the reset column. And even though I'm very lenient with the first couple of resets in my runs, it was frustrating because I tried so hard to get good results. But everything's fine, we just got to focus up. Going into the next attempt, Gengar has a great range on Pidgeot, we get the one shot. And to focus on Alakazam one more time, Gengar doesn't use Hypnosis on Alakazam because of the ranges. Like the rest of the run, Gengar can just one shot or two shot, all of the things that Gastly or Haunter might need to be cautious about. Now I do crit here in the footage, but it isn't even necessary to get the two shot, and from there, Gengar's just kind of chilling for now. The next couple of Pokemon are a little bit slow with the neutral damage, but we're progressing, and now for the moment of truth. I'm gonna miss a Hypnosis here, and I'm gonna get put to sleep in return. Now the sleep doesn't last long, thankfully, and I recover pretty fast, but this was pretty scary. And now let me talk about the one area where Body Slam just kind of falls short. This is the one part of the game where Nightshade is better. It's a guaranteed 4-shot, whereas Body Slam only has a 20% chance to get the 4-shot. That means for all the turns that I've saved throughout this run, we're gonna have to give a couple back here. Now it's a little slow, but it works. And I do have to give Gengar a pat on the back, because this was the one singular time in the entire run that I used Hypnosis. Gengar was not afraid of the psychic types, and as we thunderbolt down the turtle waiting for us at the end, Gengar stands tall with a monster result. Tallying up the final scores for today, we got Gastly with its near 2 hour and 15 minute time with a 91.81 score, which is likely the best a base stage Pokemon will ever do in this game. Haunter's time just over the 2 minute mark will be a 95.88 score. And finally, Gengar's unbelievable 1 hour, 51 minute, and 40 second time will give it a 98.27 score out of 100. And as I bring up the tier list, I do have a couple of thoughts here. Number one is that I have such anxiety about a time like Haunter's. I really wanted to get it under 2 hours, but I just couldn't. You can tell yourself that, hey, I was a few turns away, or maybe if I moved better in the overworld, I could have done it. But I think you can say that for every single run you ever do. One of the things I have worked on a lot in the past year is knowing when to leave it be, when to call it quits. When I'm just banging my head against the wall doing pointless extra playthroughs of a Pokemon because I want to stroke my ego and hit the next breakpoint, that's when I know I'm doing a little bit too much and I'm not spending my time wisely. But I digress. Now let's talk about Gengar. It's kind of the opposite of Haunter and why I dived into a few extra runs. I was stuck at this like 1 hour, 54, 55 minute range for a few runs because I kept having bad luck. I kept messing up tiny little spots. And I knew deep down that Gengar could pass Mew if I just played really well and didn't have any disasters. Gengar and Mew play very similar, with Mega Punch in the early game and then just having pretty good coverage and decent stats later. But Gengar just eventually just outpaces Mew because it doesn't have to set up. I will say that I do not think it's possible to shave off any more time off Gengar to get it close to Alakazam in that S tier, but I do think that passing Mew is a huge accomplishment. I didn't even think it was possible when I first started playing these Pokemon. Anyway, the final rankings here is going to put Gengar as the new 3rd place Pokemon, which is a real big surprise to me. Haunter's going to be in the 8th spot. Gastly is going to be sitting back in the 15th spot, comfortably in the A tier for now, unless I save like 3 minutes on Mewtwo's eventual update. The tier list was going to go into chaos, but that's a problem for another day. And if you made it this far, you're a real one. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch my little old video. And a special shout out to my channel members and patrons, because you guys really do motivate me to just keep pressing on, keep chipping away at it, and I can't thank you enough. The one thing I will leave you on is that I got a little sentimental, and we talked about my dog at the end of the last video, and honestly guys, it's unbelievable how many people reached out with similar stories, similar situations, and just how many people, even if they couldn't relate, they still reached out with kind words, and it was more of a response than I guess I thought I would get, and I really appreciate that too. It's always nice to see like the community that you build up and like the positive vibes, like when you're going through something, when just complete strangers can just reach out, tell you a similar story, give you some condolences, and move on. So I really do, like I said, I really do appreciate that. But with that said, with that situation and me barely getting done with that video on Friday, and then me having the bright idea to be like, hey, my next video is going to be a 3-way video, so not the smartest idea. I just got done with this video as well. I need to go back to some more simple videos just so I can start pumping out the stuff and just keep it simple, start getting ahead again to where I'm not like always right at the deadline. I do have a lot of ideas. Question is, will I have the time? Probably so. I don't know, but I've kept you long enough. I think it's been over 40 minutes at this point, so I guess I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.